I don't know if you guys know about this, but basically the Should All Structure Deck and the Sacred Beast Structure Deck were both the result of a poll ran in the OCG about a year ago, and basically players could vote on which decks they wanted to actually have made into a structure deck, and those were the two top results. The Charmer archetype actually got third in that poll, and that one has an upcoming structure deck as well. Now the other decks in that poll, if I remember correctly, many of them actually received support in other core sets and side releases, even though they didn't make it into an actual structure deck. The reason I'm bringing this up right now is because in the OCG they're running another structure deck poll with 10 different decks. We now know based off the last poll that even though not every single deck is going to get a dedicated structure deck, many of them might still receive support in other releases. Of course, this is all speculation at this point, but I think that it would make a lot of sense, right? If Konami is putting them on these polls, that means that Konami knows that these are fan favorite archetypes that the player base really wants more support for. At this point, the voting is still going on, but we do have a partial results article that Yu-Gi-Oh! Organization posted a couple days ago, and this basically gives us a general idea of how people are voting, at least for the moment. In today's video, I'm going to start with the least voted structure deck and go all the way to the number one most voted structure deck and kind of give my thoughts on each theme and if I feel it would actually make a good structure deck in the first place. At number 10, we have Superheavy Samurai, and this does not surprise me that much. I know that Superheavy Samurai does have a very dedicated core following of players that really enjoy the archetype, but generally speaking, especially compared to the other archetypes on this list, I can't really see this deck getting anywhere near enough votes to actually get a dedicated structure deck release. That being said, I'm aware that Superheavy Samurai decks actually do have several powerful archetype cards, so maybe getting a couple more of them could make the deck viable at a rogue level. At number 9, we have Tour Guide, which I'm not really sure if everyone understood what it really meant. It was referring to, of course, Tour Guide from the Underworld and all the cards that feature her in their artwork. Things like Tour Bus from the Underworld and Tardy Orc are great examples of things that directly relate to the Tour Guide storyline, but there are many other cards out there that feature Tour Guide or something related to that card in their artwork. I think the big challenge for the Tour Guide structure deck is that many of the cards don't really go together. I mean, Tour Guide and Tour Bus go together, kind of. I mean, Tour Bus isn't that great of card, but at least it works with Tour Guide. But all the other cards, I mean, are just kind of random support for different decks, or just generically not very good monsters like Tardy Orc. I suppose the idea here would be that you print a bunch of really strong level 3 monsters to synergize with Tour Guide specifically, and maybe they have good graveyard effects, but I think we already kind of have that with cards like Fiendish Rhino Warrior and every single Burning Abyss monster. I'm not really sure if Tour Guide really needs a structure deck, and it seems like a lot of other people feel the same way because it doesn't really have a lot of votes. At number 8, we have Kaiju, and this surprises me a little bit because I actually do feel that this would be a decent structure deck. They could really take it in a totally new direction. Right now, if you see someone use a Kaiju monster, it's probably only for removal, not in an actual Kaiju deck. In the past though, when Kaijus were first getting released in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG as world premiere cards, we actually did see a lot more players try them out as a dedicated strategy, not just as removal options. Even though it's pretty unlikely for Kaijus to get a structure deck judging by the early poll results, I still think it would be really exciting to see more support that's mainly aimed at a dedicated Kaiju deck. It would be challenging to do this, of course, because most of the conventional Kaiju monsters restrict you to only controlling one Kaiju at a time, but maybe you could print like a sub-archetype that maybe didn't directly say Kaiju in the name, but supported them directly with their effects. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber and the Field Spell are already really good cards just in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, but even more spell and trap card support could really push this deck over the edge. At number 7, you have Star Seraphs, and admittedly, I'm not a big fan of this archetype. Stick and Chair are pretty cool cards, but I know they have a lot of other support as well that wasn't really as good, but I understand many players are fans of this theme, so I mean, I guess it made it on the list in the first place, which is pretty cool. The one way that I would say that Konami would probably directly support the Star Seraph deck if it actually got a structure deck, even though I think that's pretty unlikely, is that they'd probably just print better and better rank 4 monsters, perhaps ones that take 3 materials, to really make Stick and Chair even better. In my opinion, the reason that this theme doesn't have that many votes is because it's not that interesting, it's not that dynamic. You just sort of turbo out the same cards over and over and over again, it just only makes rank 4s. And sure, they could take the deck into a completely different direction, but I think that they probably wouldn't do that, and players aren't that excited about another rank 4 strategy. So I wouldn't expect this archetype to get that many more votes. At number 6, we have Morphtronics, and I really wish that this deck actually had a lot more votes. The archetype is very unique and has gotten a lot of interesting support over the years, and one of my best friends is a huge fan of the strategy, but I really do feel like Morphtronics actually have potential to be a competitively viable deck. They already have some really insane support cards. Both of the phone cards are extremely powerful when they actually work, and the theme can perform some pretty serious combos. That being said, it's pretty unlikely at this point for Morphtronics to win the structure deck poll, but maybe Konami can give them some more support in a future release. At number 5, we have the Kuriboh archetype, and once again here, I'm gonna say, and this might sound crazy, but there's actually several really good Kuriboh support cards. I actually did an entire video talking about the Kuriboh archetype, so I actually do know about some of their cards. Kuriboh is really powerful, Kuri Bandit's really powerful. Just in general, there are a lot of good cards in this pretty unassuming theme. That being said, this is at number 5, which means that enough people actually did vote for it to get into the top 50%. I think the number 1 spot in this poll has like the vast majority of the votes, but it seems like enough people actually are interested in Kuriboh getting more support. You could probably give them some cards that spam more Kuribohs on the field. You already have some cards that do that right now, and maybe even a pretty big boss monster. But just in general, I feel like Kuribohs actually do have some good cards already, so maybe they'll have the chance to get some even better support in the future. At number 4, we have Trickstars, and this surprised me a little bit because Trickstars have already been competitively viable multiple times in multiple formats pretty much ever since release. I know that there are a lot of fans of the deck, but I mean, there are so many times that you could have played Trickstars in the past. Why do they need a structure deck right now? I realize that Shadal's won the last OCG structure deck poll, and that deck also was competitive in the past, but I feel like Konami doesn't really need to make a structure deck to make Trickstars even better. Just give them back 3 copies of Light Stage and suddenly everyone's playing Trickstars as a rogue deck once again. Shadal's really needed a whole bunch of modern cards to actually be a competitively viable deck once again. With Trickstars though, I don't really think that's the case. And that brings us to the current top 3 choices on the OCG structure deck poll for 2020. This is where it gets really exciting because, like I said, on the last structure deck poll, the top 3 choices actually did end up getting full structure deck releases. Keep in mind that the votes are not finalized right now. You still have a chance to vote if you're an OCG player, so these might not necessarily be the top 3 that end up actually winning. At number 3, we have the Gusto archetype, and this is perfect. I mean, this is really one of the decks that should be voted at the top. It makes a lot of sense. It's an older archetype with some really powerful and cool cards that never really got a chance to shine in competitive play, and it's a great choice to get a whole bunch of support in a dedicated structure deck release. Konami could do a lot with this structure deck. They could make a lot of really cool wind monsters. They could make a lot of cool new synchro support cards because it is a synchro based strategy. There are a lot of things that they could do with a Gusto structure deck, and I'm really happy to see this at the number 3 spot. At number 2, we have Ice Barriers, and yes, this is great. I really do agree with this deck getting a structure deck release. That would be really exciting. The Ice Barrier synchro monsters have seen a lot of competitive success, especially Trishula Embryonic, but the main deck monsters, not so much. You do have some standout cards that are a lot better than the other choices, but it doesn't really have enough to be competitively viable without more support. I know that Ice Barriers have always been a meme in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, so giving them a bunch of powerful support would actually be pretty cool. And finally, the most voted theme in this current structure deck poll with the partial voting results that we have is Cyber Style, and here's the funny thing, no one seems to know what that actually refers to. It could be for Cyber Dragons, which I think is how a lot of people are taking it, but it also could be for Cyber Darks, and it also could be something that's a combination of both of them, or also maybe even something completely new. I know that people love Cyber Dragon. I know that it's gotten a lot of support over the years, but that's kind of why I don't think it should be the number 1 choice. We already have a Cyber Dragon structure deck, and I know that Konami has repeated themes in the past with newer releases, but still, I don't know. I just don't really like that this is the number 1 most voted theme on the entire poll. I think that Gusto and Ice Barriers are a lot more interesting. All I hope is that once again, Konami makes a structure deck deck of all 3 of the top choices instead of just the one that wins the entire poll. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.